Today, we dive down the rabbit hole of if Marco Rossi could be on his way out of the woods with the Minnesota Wild and over to the Calgary Flames.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jess Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me. Today, I thought it would be a great opportunity to dive into some potential trade targets that the Flames may have their eye on as the offseason rolls on, but also as the draft gets closer, because we know there's likely to be some movement ahead of that. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. And let's dive right into this. Marco Rossi, quick rundown. So he is a 23-year-old center who currently plays for the Minnesota Wild, and was demoted to the fourth line through the playoffs, and did not necessarily like that. There was already kind of rumblings ahead of that about there being a disconnect between the player and the organization, and even after Rossi scored some goals, he went to the coach and said, "Hey, is there any way I can move up in the lineup?" And Hines said no. So I think, at the end of the season in the meetings and whatnot, they said, yeah, I hope to be here for a while, but no player is just going to come right out and say, yeah, no, I will be requesting a trade in the next few weeks. I don't think that unless you're Nikita Zadorov, and then you're on that. At that point, your agent will do that on Twitter for you. So, but he's only 5'9", which is, a concern, always going to be a concern for some organizations. I don't necessarily think that's a concern for Calgary when it comes to looking at players, because, you've seen this organization have small players come in and just shatter those stereotypes. Obviously, Johnny Gaudreau and Dustin Wolf being two of those guys. One of the things about Rossi is that his so this past season, he had 24 goals, 60 points. He's a top 6 center. But his development was deeply and heavily impacted by the pandemic. And one of the first times I heard Marco Rossi's name was back in 2020, when he got COVID, and how he ended up getting, I believe it was myocarditis, which is like water around your heart and like swelling, inflammation. That's the word I'm looking for, inflammation. And there was an article or an interview he did. I can't remember if it was The Athletic or if it was Sports Illustrated, but he was back home over in Europe, and he asked his parents to sleep with him, like sleep in bed with him, because he thought that he wasn't going to wake up from how sick he was. And that's terrifying, to be an 18, 19-year-old kid, and that being something you have to think about and experience. So really, ever since I read that story, I've always been rooting for him, because that's terrifying. But I think that there are a lot of players that we're seeing kind of come up on that entry, like the end of their entry level contracts, that were impacted, like they're maybe not health wise, but developmental wise, by the pandemic, by the restrictions, by certain guidelines, a shortened season, or what have you, around those times. And it's starting to play out now, and we're seeing it. But I do like Marco Rossi a lot. He's, like I said, 23 years old, has the capabilities of being a top 6 center, which is what you need. Sorry, and we're going to talk about that coming up a little bit later, but in the last 2 seasons, he has scored 20 plus goals. He checks every single box for the Flames. A 23-year-old center. What more could you want, right? I mean, obviously, like, a right-handed shot would be great, but we know what that means. And even though he doesn't shoot right, I think that the price tag that comes along with a 23-year-old center, it's not cheap. It's not. And we'll dive into that a little bit more later, but I do feel like this is an avenue that the Flames should explore if they're not already exploring it. I'm sure things like this come up on their radars well before it hits our stratosphere, and I just think it is something that the Flames could really take advantage of. It does remind me of Morgan Frost in a way. The Morgan Frost situation where there was a disconnect between the Flyers and Frost. And it certainly appears like there is a disconnect between Rossi and the Wild. So I don't want to say like the Flames could like get in on like when the situation is like vulnerable, because that sounds pretty bad. But I do think that the Flames kind of have the ability to come into this and say, hey, look what we just did when acquiring Morgan Frost. We took, and Joel Farabee, we took a not so great situation and turned it into something brand new and better for the player. And I think that, us as an organization could offer the same to you. And then rattle off the list of things, including the new facility you're building. But coming up next, we're going to talk about why the Flames should do this and why I think they'll bark up this tree and kind of, go down this road. Coming up next here on Locked On Flames. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling full longer. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see right here that I have the in-shell variety, no salt. Watching the blood pressure and sodium intake these days, and I love snacking on them throughout the day and just while I'm outlining the show, and just the fuel to keep me going. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thanks everyone for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you are following me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Jess Belmosto. I am a big proponent of exploring all your options, not just sticking to one path, right? I think that you have to branch out and explore, this avenue, go down this fork in the road, check in on this player. Oh, okay, how are things going over there? Is this team, what are they looking for? And I think that's something that the Flames do well. I think that they are willing to knock on everyone's door and call just about anyone and everyone. And with Marco Rossi being an RFA this summer, there are certainly a few ways the Flames go about this. So he is obviously at the end of his entry-level contract, and the Wild hold his rights. I do not think that this is a situation where the Flames offer sheet him. I think that that is something that is kind of too expensive for the Flames to do. Just because you do have to have, every condition that goes along with an offer sheet is a lot, especially if, this team is just willing to trade the player. Like, it's not, and you can just do a much easier route without giving up a lot more. And then you have to. But I think they explore the option of trading for Rossi. I think that their first, player that they'll offer up is going to be Rasmus Andersson. Like, that's the player that makes the most sense. I know that Conroy tried to save face during the season and say, oh, we want Rasmus here long term. We really want to see that. Just for Andersson to kind of allude to the fact that he's played his last game as a Flame. So I think that it's a very different situation from like the Markstrom situation where, they didn't tell Andersson that they were working on a trade and then fully back out or have it crumble right in front of them days before the deadline, right? Wasn't anything like that. And hasn't been anything like that. And I do think that, really any team could benefit from having Andersson in their lineup. I think that obviously a team like the Wild that, obviously made it into the playoffs, they could use a little more defense to help, stop those goals. And I feel like Andersson would obviously be a good addition to their power play as well. But what if that's not what they want? What if they don't want a 28-year-old player on an expiring contract? Well, you figure out what they want. I think that the only real untouchables the Flames have are Zane Parekh and Dustin Wolf. To me, those are the only true untouchables. If you want someone, like, everyone is on the table, regardless of, any, like, no movement clause and things like that. Like, obviously those come into play, but they can ask for anyone. You got to shoot for the stars. But I think this is reasonable to pursue for both teams. I think that for the Flames, Michael Backlund can't be your 2C. This is not 2011. This is not the mid-2010s. You need to find yourself a 23 to 25-year-old, 26-year-old young center to take over that role. And I know that Frost is, kind of still finding his spot on the roster. And, Huska's pretty, stubborn's necessarily the right word, but Sutter, wow, what a slip that was. Huska is very set in his ways. I do think that it is similar to Sutter, and he gets away with a little bit more because I don't know why. But anyways, that's a topic for a different day. I think that if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think that's kind of the way that Huska was operating this season. And that's cool and all, but at some point you kind of have to do something different to switch it up. Especially, if you traded for Morgan Frost, he should probably be playing a little higher up in your lineup, especially if he's playing well and Backlund is hurt. But I digress. We know we know that the team has a goal of getting younger and getting faster and having more production. They need to see an uptick in production and goal scoring if they want to compete. And the opportunity is right there. it is presenting itself pretty much to you. I mean, I know it hasn't been made official or anything that Rossi is available, but all signs are kind of pointing to something is going to happen this season or this off season, and I think that that's fine. I mean, not every player is meant to be somewhere long term, like where they're drafted long term. Some players fit in the organization, and sometimes things just don't work out, and that's okay. But the Flames have to go down this route if they want to be taken seriously and be a competitive, a legitimate team that players consider going to or teams consider calling. Well, you got to jump on it. Jump on every opportunity you can. And I think that Marco Rossi would fit in very well with this organization, especially at that age and where the Flames, where the needs that he would address for this rebuilding team. But coming up next, we are going to talk about why the Flames maybe wouldn't go ahead and explore this trade.
An award-winning mattress can change your life. I speak from experience. It happened to me. After years of uncomfortable sleeps, I recently switched to Bear Mattress, and the results were instant. Bear Mattress is designed with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. I used to deal with night sweats, but Bear's best-in-class cooling ensures optimal temperature regulation, which prevents overheating and helps me stay comfortable all night long. Bear offers a wide variety of mattresses, but to get the right one for you, take their sleep quiz that matches you to your perfect mattress based on body type and sleep preferences. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout to get 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com. Use my promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We're here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your Calgary Flames every day. And let's dive right back into this, because where there are positives, there are also going to be negatives. And I think that's really how you have to look at every situation when discussing the Flames. Both sides of the coin, right? Because yes, there are so many reasons why this is the obvious answer or obvious option to pursue. But then there's a flip side to that. Why wouldn't they consider pursuing Marco Rossi? Well, if your scouts don't see the vision, maybe it's not worth what they're asking. Could the Wild be onto something with him only being, a bottom six player rather than a top six player? Could we be looking at a Martin Pospisil situation here where he has come in and, kind of gone on the tear, but then when it really matters, or when things plateau, they just kind of go down sharply after that. It's pretty clear that the Wild don't necessarily value him at what the open market may value him as a free agent. From what I was reading, he would probably get a bridge deal with Minnesota this offseason. and you're looking 4 to 5 years, around like $5 million. That's the high end of things. And if you're looking at a long-term extension around 7 years, you're still looking at about $6 million, which, I mean, like, honestly, I'll happily take either for myself. But, you know, what does the player value themselves at, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to have some sort of agreement. Like, if you're trading for this guy, you're going to have to sign him too. And are you just going to sign him to a 3-year deal and, you know, a short bridge deal? I don't know. Are you putting all your eggs in that basket? And is there, like, what do the Wild know? Right? I have a lot of opinions on the Wild's medical team staff, especially after 4 Nations, and the Derek Boogaard situation. But is there something else going on potentially? I don't know. It is just, there's a whole can of worms that you don't know. And also, what if their asking price is too high? Because what if they want Connor Zary in return? No disrespect to Marco Rossi, but I'm not giving up Connor Zary for him. If we had to trade Connor Zary, it would need to be for a player like Matthew Nyes, in my humble and honest opinion. But you have to look at this again from the long-term picture, right? Because we talked about this on yesterday's episode, where you have this long-term plan. And the roster you have now, how does that fluctuate? Like, do you see these players that are under term for, you know, still have a chunk of time left as part of your roster that you want to be competitive in 2 to 3 years? Because obviously you're not moving that Jonathan Huberdeau contract. You have Backlund's contract expiring. You have Coleman, who's 2 years left, I want to say. Anderson's expiring. Like, there's a lot of room for movement. And could you see this 23-year-old that you have not seen play with the guys in your organization part of that deal, part of this process? Because I don't think if you trade for him, he's going to necessarily want to sign a 1-year deal. I think that's silly. But I also think you're silly if you throw a 7-year contract at him when you haven't seen him play with your organization. That seems like a recipe for disaster, in all honesty. But, you know, if the asking price is too high, if you have experts who, you know, your scouting department, if they are saying, please don't, you know, this is a red flag, don't overlook this, or, hey, we've noticed this, it's not, you know, it's something that's been addressed, but he hasn't been able to iron it out of his game, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's certain things you just have to kind of overlook, but also take into heavy consideration. I would definitely check out Locked On Wild. I am a big fan of Seth Tupal's work, as well as JD Young from Locked On Sharks. Both of those shows are fantastic. And I think that both shows can really offer you this similar insight to what I'm discussing here. But obviously, no one is going to be more familiar with Rossi than Seth from Locked On Wild. And probably have him on the show at some point this summer, depending on where things kind of fall. But Do the Flames consider going after Marco Rossi? 23-year-old center, back-to-back 20-plus goal seasons, development kind of derailed a little bit because of the pandemic. He's only 5'9", but we know how this organization just eats up undersized players for breakfast. Is this something the Flames do? Make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your Calgary Flames every day, and I will see you all later. Bye-bye.